There's much more incentive for countries to get Trump right fast in a meaningful way, to give him what he wants, to give him deals, but also there are far more things that he can break. Things that he can break, U.S.-China relationship in a much more dangerous environment today than it was back in 2016. Things he can fix, Russia-Ukraine, the war is going to be over in short order. There'll be a ceasefire. The question will be whether the Europeans stay together around that ceasefire or whether they fragment. And that matters not just geopolitically, but it matters for to what extent do we believe the EU will continue to be a regulatory superpower? Will the EU be aligned in being able to drive common policies on things like technology in 5 years the way they are right now? The response to Trump is a very big question. And the biggest point here, and the place where I personally disagree most with Trump geopolitically, by the way, which I don't think I've talked about before, is that almost any American leader that you would find today would argue that a strong EU is in the United States' interest because they have aligned policies and values, and they're a voice of stability in a global order that is increasingly fragmenting, with a lot of rogue actors like Russia and Iran, and with a major adversary like China. Like, you want a strong Europe. Trump fundamentally rejects that. Trump believes that a strong Europe is a competitor to the United States. He's not interested in aligned values. He doesn't accept those values himself anyway. He wants bilateral relationships with individual countries that are transactional, where he can get a better deal for the United States and where the U.S. is more powerful. So that is a very different worldview. And it puts massive pressure on the Europeans to either stay together or for individual European leaders to say, I'm going to cut my own deal with Trump. And I'd watch the Italians carefully on this. I'd watch the Germans carefully on this in the coming months.
Might not be improbable, but it certainly would be a breakthrough.
It's a breakthrough, yeah.
And by the way, I heard someone whose name I can't mention because it was an off-the-record statement, but who has credibility in this world, let's say, that we're discussing right now, say that secretly the Europeans are dying for an end to the war in Ukraine.
Not all Europeans. The Poles aren't, the Balts aren't, the Nordics aren't, the French aren't, but the Romanians aren't. But there are lots of other Europeans that aren't on the front lines, and Macron, who sees himself as now the promoter of those on the front lines in opposition to Trump, very different from where he was at the beginning of the war when he was the one reaching out to Putin. Now it's the Germans reaching out to Putin and Macron saying you shouldn't have done that. So different place for Macron, and different place domestically for him too. But the non-frontline Europeans would like to see an end to this war.